We have to feed the YouTube channel a little bit, so we're doing a Justice Hunters tier list with my first impression of the current format, which I want to see. I'm excited to talk about the format, so I want to do this. Keep in mind, this is my first impression of the format. I am currently very much focused on testing for Master Duel Worlds, so I've only had a limited amount of time playing with these decks. I have played with Justice Hunters a little bit, not as much as I would have liked to, because I think this format is awesome. I think all three of the new decks are worth trying out and are really cool. But let's talk about it a little bit. I have these in completely random order. Maybe I'll pull something up first. Let's pull this deck up first. Vanquish Soul Canine, I do believe is going to be a top tier deck. However, I will say one thing. I feel like Vanquish Soul Canine was anticipated as like the best deck by so much because it's been dominating the OCG for such a long time. The deck is not as good or like as far above the rest as you might think. Unironically, I think this deck is not even straight up that much better than pure Vanquish Soul at the European Championship was. Because something I've noticed when I was playing this deck for the first time with the Canine cards added to it is that compared to the previous version with like Pot of Extravagance and stuff like that, you are missing some consistency in that deck. Like you are losing the Pot of Extravagance, and as an exchange, you gain like a higher ceiling with the Canine cards, which is not always better. You know, sometimes you draw a hand where it's like, instead of a Pot of Extravagance, I have like a Jockle in my hand now, but I can't do anything with that because I don't have another level 5, so it doesn't add anything to my hand. And then, like, you know, you get interrupted on something, like your Stake Your Soul gets ashed or whatever, and then it's just like, okay, well, now, what now, right? The deck is stronger, like, it has a higher ceiling than pure Vanquish Soul, but it has more consistency issues. So, honestly, it's give and take. The way I would like to put it is, like, I think your good hands are now a lot better than before, but you have more bad hands as well. It's like a higher variance version of pure Vanquish Soul, in my opinion, from previously. So I think it's top tier. I think it is absolutely super strong and super hard to beat if it draws access to the Vanquish Soul cards. Like if it doesn't brick, it is very powerful. But I also don't think you are completely crazy if you just kept playing pure Vanquish Soul with like Pot of Extravagance. And ironically, I think that's also fine. I think that's legit. And I also think there's other variants of Canine decks that could also very much be as good, if not better. I think it's a top tier deck, but I think there are more top tier decks. Next up, Canine Crystron. Let's do all the Canines first. Canine Crystron, I think, is a deck with top tier potential. I think this is a deck that I wouldn't be surprised if it was even stronger than Vanquish Soul Canine in certain circumstances. This is a deck where the Canine cards actually give you consistency, because cards like Sylphefnir or Solfador are cards that are typically or like sometimes stuck in your hand in Crystron decks, and in this deck you actually like use the Canine cards to get those out of your hand and get your Crystron engine going, as well as you can actually bridge into the Crystron cards with a rank 5, which is like the Infinitrack River Stormer or whatever. So the deck is strong. The deck still suffers a little bit, I think, from Lancia if people still play it for Malice. Like Lancia, the K9 cards are good into Lancia, but the Crystron cards obviously aren't that great. It's a deck that I need more time to evaluate, but I do think it has top tier potential, which is why I made that category for decks that I'm sure are good. I'm just not sure if they are actually better than something like Vanquish Soul Canine, but I think Canine Crystron is good. At least looking at the OCG, it's a deck that people played, even though most people tend to prefer Canine Vanquish Soul, but that could also just be because they have Max C. Canine Crystron is like terrible into Max C, but we don't have that problem. I think it could be good for the TCG, unironically. The combos it does are strong. The Canine cards work very well in the deck, and you don't have to worry about Maxi as much, so it's cool. Uva is going to be also pretty strong against it, even though you probably have some lines around it, but Uva is good against it. And then Canine in general, I wanted to talk about for a second, because I think, like, as far as I'm concerned, there isn't really a pure Canine deck at the moment. At least, like, no one has really done it in any of the regionals that I've seen, or at least not in the ones that, like, the top cuts that I've looked at. So something like a pure Canine deck probably has to go into all right. But I also wanted to mention that I think, like, the Canine engine in general, even past those two decks, like Vanquish Soul and Crystron, I think the Canine is an engine with top tier potential. Like, there is other decks that can play these cards for sure. They have very high potential if your deck has level 5s. I saw there was a regional that was won by K9 Memento Fiendsmith, where they just played the K9 cards as extra hand traps, but you can also use like Jockle to summon like Tatsuno Toshigo out of your hand or something, or Akihiron, and get into some rank 5s that way, and like protect your Memento combos with Ripper and stuff like that. It's good, I think. I think K9 is just a very high potential engine. So that's that. Yummy. Yummy is a deck that I think is pretty strong, and without a doubt, I'm putting it at least here, but it honestly might as well be up here. I think one of the big advantages of Yummy is that it's one of the decks that does not trigger Izuna at all. At least as of right now, a lot of people are still stuck playing like the regular hand traps, like your Ash, Valor, Imperm type decks. Those cards are not very good against Yummy. Yummy plays very well under those hand traps. Yummy also plays pretty well under cards like Droll and Lockbird, or the Charmies are also, the half boards that Yummy makes into the Charmies are actually fine. So the key thing with Yummy is that it is very efficient when your opponent tries to stop you from making a board, basically. And at the moment, I think most people are trying to stop people from making boards. I think as soon as people realize that you can probably beat Yummy by using certain board breakers against it, like, I don't know, Super Poly or maybe even Dark Ruler or something like that, then maybe the deck gets a little worse if people start properly preparing for it. At the moment, I think it looks pretty well positioned. And it can play Imperm, Purge, a lot of hand traps basically that you can exploit the low consistency that Vanquish Soul K9 has by using those hand traps against it that don't trigger Izuna. Because all of a sudden you can safely Imperm or Purge or Songs of the Dominators, a Raisin, without playing into the Izuna extender, right? And that's really good. So I think Yummy is a pretty high potential deck at the moment. I'm pretty confident to call it top tier in different variations. And then Draco Tail. Draco Tail, I think, goes in the very high of top tier potential for now. I personally am convinced that there is a version of Draco Tail out there that could be the best pick for the format. I'm biased because it's by far my favorite deck from the new pack. But I just think this deck was criminally underrated in comparison to the other two, like K9 and Yummy. Everyone was like, oh, those are going to be so good. They're so strong in the OCG right now, and so on and so forth. I think Draco Tail is such a powerful and grindy deck. Yes, it doesn't have the same like flashy combos as the other two. Like the Draco Tail turn ones are like a little bit simpler, but I do think the simplicity is kind of like the beauty of this deck, where it can do so much with so little. And it also has so much room for improvement still, I think, for the TCG, because the TCG format is really not that close to the OCG format at the moment. We have huge differences in terms of the cards that are legal, and it's not just max seeded I'm talking about. I'm talking about so many other differences, like Talents being at 1, Called By being at 1, Appaloosa being banned. Actually, no, it's banned in the OCG now too, but like, I don't know, Baron not being legal. There's like so many fundamental differences. We have Mitsurugi as a deck, which is also something that makes a huge difference. We're going to talk about that later. But I think Draco Tail, give it some time. Give players some time, because I've already seen some regional results from Draco Tail with super different lists. Fenrir as well, a card that's banned in the OCG, is great in Draco Tail. Some people are playing Shaddoll, some people are playing King of the Swamp, some people are playing pure Draco Tail with hand traps. Then there's so much other things you can do, like Cartesia, Patchwork, all that stuff. There's so much left to solve with Draco Tail, whereas like the Vanquish Soul and Yummy deck lists are already kind of not solved, but like standardized to about like 80-90%. And I think Draco Tail has so much potential in it. I would not be surprised if for certain tournaments someone finds a Draco Tail list that just is really good against what everyone else is doing and then just like wins the event with it. I think Draco Tail's awesome. And now we're just going over some of the other stuff, all the older decks, and see how they would rank now. I think Archmage is a deck that I've actually experimented a little bit with. Archmage Fiendsmith. I think it's a cool deck. I think it's just all right though at the moment. I think the power level for Archmage just calls for like 1 or 2 more support cards. I don't think it is particularly good at the moment. It's an all right deck though. Like if you want to play Archmage for like local or regional level, I think it's playable. I'm not going to call it a bad deck because I don't think it is that. But yeah. Blue Eyes. Blue Eyes goes like above this, I think. Maybe bottom of good. Like, Blue Eyes is still a fine deck. I think Blue Eyes also... I think Dominus Purge is a decent card at the moment in this format. I think it's solid against specifically K9 Vanquish Soul because it's a deck that, like, is a little inconsistent. So if you can throw in a Dominus Purge against it, I think that's pretty solid. It's probably going to be the bottom of good, though, just because it's like you are never going to beat these decks going second unless you really heavily hand trap them with Blue Eyes. Specifically, Yummy is going to be like really difficult when you go second. That's in general the problem with Blue Eyes. And Blue Eyes is completely fine going first, especially if you draw the Primate engine. But going second, you're going to have some trouble because right now there's not many decks in the format that you can successfully effect Veiler. And that's a problem for Blue Eyes. Ryziel variations. I think Ryziel variations are still good decks. Specifically, these two, Onomat and Heraldic Beast. Honestly, here's the thing, right? Ryziel decks were so powerful last format that they basically single-handedly forced everyone to play Droll Lockbird. And only because everyone played Droll Lockbird, these decks were actually like manageable, I suppose, last format is the right way to put it. Like, they were strong, but like the existence of Droll kind of like kept them in check. The problem is that Droll Lockbird becomes significantly worse against the new top tier decks, right? And so with Droll Lockbird phasing out of the format a little bit, I think that is something that the Ryziel decks could heavily benefit from. And as long as all of these cards are legal, you can still do some crazy things. You can still hand loop with Ouroboros, which is crazy, and set up some other stuff like Cross and so on and so forth, which is still scary. The one thing that I think loses a lot of potential in the current format is the Protoss locking is probably going to go back, like, down a little bit, because if you don't know what you're playing against in game one, it's a little bit tougher to Protoss lock now, because previous format, it was like, okay, I'm going to go Protoss call Dark, and, well, that hits most of the decks in the format, like Mitsu and Malice. Now with Vanquish Soul, Yami, Draco Tail, Crystron, it's really difficult to blind Protoss. Post side, you can still do it, but game one, it's gonna not be as relevant, which means you're gonna have a tough time into Charmies, which, even though Droll is gonna be a lot less popular for now, Charmies will not go anywhere, and Charmies are still really good against Ryziel, both Charmies, Uva and Purulia. I think they're still good decks, but I don't know if they're that good, really. Mitsurugi, on the other hand, I think is a deck that still has top tier potential. I think this is one of the most interesting questions for the upcoming format, is how well does Mitsurugi Ryziel, or even pure Mitsurugi, how well does that match up with the new decks? Super interesting question. Super hard to tell from the first weekend of tournaments, because on the one hand, I saw very few Mitsurugi decks in top cuts of regionals. But on the other hand, I also think that's because people just wanted to play the new decks. You know, like everyone wants to... Right now, everyone I know has like one or multiple of the new decks that they really vibe with and they really want to try it. So I just think the representation for Mitsurugi was relatively low, because everyone wanted to try K9 or Draco Tail or Yummy, or maybe even Crystron K9 or whatever. Like, everyone wanted to try those decks. So they like put their Mitsurugi cards aside and tried the new stuff. I think we're gonna still see people, for like when the format gets serious, quote unquote, like the Canadian YCS, I could still see some people bring out the Mitsurugi cards and still do well with them, because like Murakumo is a crazy interaction against Yami. Also, like, it's just a... It's still a really, really good deck. I honestly, I think you should not underestimate Mitsurugi moving forward. I think it's like the deck with... I think it is the best free Justice Hunters deck, basically, into the new format, I think. Lunalight, I've never been a big fan of Lunalight, but I guess it is a solid deck. I think some of the new decks might struggle with the Panther Dancer, or Liger Dancer is the name. So I do think it's good, but I just don't vibe with it. I don't know. I haven't really played it that much. I've played against it a decent amount, and I think it's just that, I guess, how does Vanquish Soul out the towers, I guess? Can Vanquish Soul out the Liger Dancer? I guess you can, yeah, I mean, you can do the same thing that we did with pure Vanquish Soul, right? You can just like get the field spell out, protect your stuff, and just burn them to death. I don't know. I don't particularly like Lunalight, but I think the K9 cards make it easier to out the towers, because you can make like the Arc Rebellion as well. Some people have been playing Kurikara or Dogoran as well, so not a big fan of it. Memento is still a really good deck. Probably like one of the like at the top of the good category. Is still a really strong combo deck that has board breaking potential going second, and is one of the strongest decks after you use a Charmy on your opponent when they can't make their full board. It does play into Izuna pretty badly whenever you start with Tatsuno Toshigo. I think that's a downside, right? Like when you start with Tatsuno Toshigo in hand and your opponent has Izuna, they'll just make like Valon, book your horse, and that's like not easy to extend through. And a lot of your combos start that way, you know, like when you start the horse directly or Anguich, you have to do that. And then the Izuna is a really big punish. But yeah, it's still good for sure. Punk is all right. Not a huge fan of the deck, honestly, but that's mainly because the way I've been seeing it is mostly with a lot of hand traps, and I just don't think that's a great approach. Like Punk to me just screams a lot of one-card combos and a lot of hand traps, which is just not what I like to see in this format. However, you could maybe build it in a different direction and play other cards, because you do have a lot of non-engine space. But then the question is your board strong enough when you're going first? I'm not sure. You have a lot of hand effects that play into Izuna pretty badly, like when you start Foxy Tune to summon Zeamin from the deck or whatever, and it immediately gets booked. That's kind of awful. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really believe in Punk. Sky Striker, on the other hand, hear me out, okay? Hear me out. Just give me a second of Sky Striker Copium, all right? Sky Striker is not a bad deck. And one of the main reasons why it really was tough to perform with Sky Striker before Justice Hunters was that everyone was playing Droll Lockbird. And Droll Lockbird is so good against Sky Striker. If people play less Droll Lockbird, trust me, this deck in the hands of a good player is good. I'm not gonna put it in top tier potential because I'm not delusional, but if people play less Droll, Sky Striker is a good deck. It is a good deck. Unironically, I think it's a good and playable deck if you don't have to worry about Droll Lockbird that much. You can break Yummy boards with Sky Striker, no problem. You might even be able to mess with Vanquish Soul K9 with full power like board breaker Sky Striker. I'd have to try it. I would have to try it in the new format because I only played it last format. But like, I think it's good. I think, honestly, I'm a little biased, but I think it's a good deck. I think it's a good deck. Better than Memento. I mean, yes. I think I would rather play Sky Striker next format than Memento. But there's also some bias in that. But yeah, I think it's good. I believe in it. Water. It can't be that bad still, because it's still a scary deck to go second against. It probably struggles with Izuna a little bit, because the annoying part about Izuna is that like the monster you summon with it is untargetable, because normally summoning a monster on turn 0 against Mermail is really scary because it turns on the Poseidra monster and the Poseidra Exceed. But like, because they're untargetable, it's actually fine. Izuna is really good against Mermail because you can just make Ripper and stop an important graveyard effect. Or you make, like, depending on how they start, if they start with Shadow Squad to summon Neptibus, you can just book the Neptibus, which is pretty good. The XYZ does not target. Ooh, does the XYZ not target? Hold, let me double check that real quick. Ooh, okay, it does not target. You're correct. Actually, it does not target. That's true. Okay, then only the main deck Poseidra is scary. And you actually, the main deck Poseidra is not a problem, and the extra deck one is a huge problem then. Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, I still think Mermail is like really scary when it goes first, but going second, I just don't really see it beating any of the top tier decks right now. Like whether it's Vanquish Soul, Yummy, I guess Draco Tail maybe you can beat. Yeah, you can beat Draco Tail with a good Mermail hand. Yeah, no, I believe that. But Crystron, Mitsu, like you're not breaking these decks with Mermail. So I think that's eh. Fiendsmith. Fiendsmith is... This hurts me, by the way. I don't know where. Like, pure Fiendsmith with hand traps is not going to be reliable because there simply aren't enough good hand traps for the format, I guess. I guess you could play K9s in it, like as hand traps as well as like ways to make Moon. Like maybe a K9 Fiendsmith deck could work. I could see that, even though Fiendsmith has like no level 5s. I've seen someone play like a K9 Primite deck with, I think it had Fiendsmith in it as well. I thought that looked fun. I don't know. Maybe Fiendsmith K9 could be a thing, but like the Fiendsmith control deck is only okay. Like it's solid, but there's going to be a lot of matches where you just can't hand trap your opponent enough. This is a tough one for me to evaluate because we just don't have the cards in Europe yet. But Gem Knights is something I wanted to include it, but I cannot do more than just give you my impression for it. And my impression is that, I mean, obviously we are talking about this as like blind second, breakboard, and try to kill. I think a big difference between this and Sky Striker is that when you have to kill your opponent, you can't play Dark Ruler, which I think is a phenomenal card against Yummy and Vanquish Soul if you play the right deck for it. So like that not being a possibility for this deck is a little awkward. At the same time, I think you can probably kill Yummy relatively consistently. You might have some trouble against Vanquish Soul because Vanquish Soul can set up some really broken boards and the interruption is really layered. Like you have to force the back row, you have to deal with the monsters, and then the monsters can also tag out into more disruption from the hand. So even if you have like a droplet, they could still tag out into a Caesar later or summon Holy Sue later or whatever. So I think that matchup is not easy, but it still is a good deck probably. But this is it's only my impression. I haven't actually played against this deck because we still don't have the cards in Europe. We're getting them soon, but I was not able to really try this deck. I think it's a good deck. Maybe I'm over or underestimating it by a little bit, but I think it's fine. Malice. Malice is still a deck with top tier potential. There's not much to really say about this. I think one thing that Malice could benefit from is side decking is difficult in this format, I think, because it's not actually possible to completely ignore the previous decks like Mitsurugi, Malice, and Ryziel, but like you also have to respect the new decks, right? Like you have to respect Vanquish Soul K9, Yummy, Draco Tail, Crystron K9, maybe all that things. Like it's kind of difficult to really justify putting super targeted hate into your side deck at the moment. I think people are still going to play Lancia, but I think the times of playing Lancia and Chaos Hunter might be over. Like, for example, my deck at the European Championship, I main decked Meowls, I side decked Lancia and Chaos Hunter. That was the amount of like Malice hate I was using. I don't think you can afford to do that going forward. And I think if people just play Lancia, nothing else, then Malice is fine, especially when it goes first. It's going to be very scary and very hard to stop. Of course, I think Vanquish Soul has a good matchup into Malice because the interactions you have are super powerful. Like Holy Suit to Steel is really strong against Malice. If they ever play into Izuna by activating March Hare in hand, like the Izuna is also really good to like book their stuff with Valon. But Malice is good, I think still. I think Malice is still powerful. No questions asked. I think it's still a powerful deck, as much as I hate to admit it. Orchist is aight. Orchist is aight. That's it. Like maybe Mitsurugi Orchist can make something happen, but I like Orchist. I'm not convinced I would play it at a big tournament, honestly. I could see someone still doing well with it, let's say at a regional. I wouldn't be super surprised if someone topped the YCS with it. I would be very surprised if someone was able to do something like it did last format and just won NAWCQ. I feel like that was more of an outlier for Orchist, especially considering the power of the new decks. But it's still fine. I'm still calling it a good deck, you know? Like, there's a lot of decks here. All of these things in good. I think there is like little reason from a competitive perspective to play them over the decks up here. But the reason can just be, I like this deck. And if that's your reasoning, it's completely fine to play any of these decks. Like, not everyone always wants to play the absolute best deck at a tournament. Sometimes you just want to play a deck because you like it. And all of these decks in good are all completely viable decks in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Like if you want to play a tournament with any of these decks, you can absolutely do well. If you put some work into them and play a good list and play it well, like they're all legit, I think. Not Regenesis though. This does not go for Regenesis. Regenesis is meh. It just like, this is the definition of, this deck is not just a little bit too fair. This deck is way too fair, unfortunately. Like there's differences between Draco Tail is like fair, you know? Draco Tail is a fair deck, maybe a little bit too fair, which is why I'm only putting it in top tier potential, but it's still really good. And Regenesis is just way too fair. I'm not. I like the cards. I'm a really big fan of the concept, but I don't think it's good at the moment. Live Twin Fiendsmith is all right. I think it's way too bad into Fuva for it to be considered like an actually good deck. And Fuva is one of the few hand traps that everyone still agrees is still good, you know? Like a lot of regular hand traps, Valor, Imperm, Ash, Ogre, whatever, everyone's talking about, should we still play those? Should we cut them? everyone still agrees Fuba is very good. And Fuba is the one thing that destroys this deck. So that's unfortunate. It's like playable, but like not, I don't think it's good. White Forest. White Forest is a little bit like Mermail, where going first, you can cook some crazy endboards with White Forest that most of these decks will not be able to break. But going second, you're gonna struggle a lot. White Forest, similar to some other decks on this list. The only reason I'm putting it into good is because I'm predicting less Stroll and Lockbird. And I think that's big for White Forest. I think if White Forest doesn't get rolled, I think it's pretty good for the deck. Maybe you struggle a little bit too much into an Azuna that can book your tuners depending on how you start. Like, let's say you go LZ, that activates in hand, right? And then you normal summon Sylvie, and then your opponent goes book the Sylvie. But then you can still go, the Sylvie can still grab you Tails, and then Tails can grab you the other tuner, so maybe it's fine. Izuna can suck. Why book? Because not everyone is playing Nash Knight with Izuna. But yes, of course, you can also attach the monster, but it doesn't make a big difference for the sake of the argument. It's like the monster is gone. Is Detonator pure Ryzeal, or is it also Mitsu Ryzeal or the Fiendsmith Mitsu? No, that stuff is included in Mitsu up here. I think all Mitsu variants have top tier potential. This is more like Ryzeal variations, whatever it could be that isn't Onomat or Heraldic. And I think that's my first impression of the format right now. I think there's a lot of exciting new decks that you can try out with the new set that look very promising. I think Malice and Mitsurugi are still well positioned though. I still think they are very much playable. And I think at the moment there's a lot of decks in the format that are just good. Not the best decks, but definitely playable if you just want to play them, which I think is honestly, it makes it for a pretty exciting format at the moment. I think Justice, I'm such a big fan of Justice Hunters because the new decks are all powerful and fun at the same time, while not really like pushing anything out of the format entirely. Like all of these decks you can still play from previously, and they're not bad now. They're not invalidated by the new decks. And the new decks are also not like miles above the rest. They all have their weaknesses. You know, Vanquish Soul K9 struggles with consistency a little bit. Yami is actually kind of surprisingly breakable. Draco Tail is powerful but fair at the same time. So like none of them, each in their own ways, none of them like completely invalidates all the older decks. I think it's a really cool set. I think it's an awesome format. I think it's looking really fun.